Remember when Superman fought the Incredible Hulk? Or when Batman teamed up with Daredevil and Spider-Man to take down crime? Well, DC and Marvel just announced they are reprinting their classic crossover collections into two oversized hardcovers. Now, the DC vs. Marvel Omnibus and DC vs. Marvel The Amalgam Age are both available for pre-order right now at Organic Price Books. So if you want to learn about Dark Claw or the original Spider-Boy, go ahead and place your pre-order. You'll get over 30% off and you'll save $2 every time with code BJKicks at checkout. Just visit comicsardope.com/crossover. That's comicsardope.com/crossover. Welcome back to Comics Are Dope. I'm BJ Kicks. And, a lot has been made of the conversation about diversity, equity, inclusion, representation. But today, I'm having a conversation with someone who's sort of the best case scenario when it comes to all of these conversations. I'm talking to Morgan Hampton. Morgan Hampton is a member of the inaugural class of the Milestone Initiative, which was brought forth by DC Comics, Milestone Media, and Ally Financial to bring more creators of color, minority, diverse comic book creators into the proper industry, give them some training, give them some connections, and, hopefully get them new opportunities that they may not have had otherwise. And so Morgan, being a member of that class, we talk a lot about just his love for comics, what got him interested in the medium, the writing work that he did before, the sort of fierce networking it took for him to build a foothold in this industry. And then, of course, life after the Milestone Initiative and after his breakout series, Cyborg. So here to talk with me is Morgan Hampton. I'll let you listen now. All right, guys. So my next guest is an up and coming comics writer. You've seen his writing on Black Nerd Problems, but probably most recently you've seen it on the Cyborg miniseries from DC Comics. And today I'm talking to Morgan Hampton. Hey, what's up, man? How you doing?
How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, no problem at all, man. I'm doing well. So yeah, man, when I started up this podcast again, I wrote down a list of names that I wanted to try to get on. You were near the top of that list. And I'm really excited to have you. Thanks for just showing up, man.
Yeah, I mean, I watch you all the time, so it's kind of surreal to be on the show now.
Oh, that's
I watch your or not unboxing, but when you get your pull box reviews every
uh
week, and then yeah, I've been watching the podcast since you brought that back too. So
nice,
this is
man. Well,
fun.
thank you. Thank you. That's what's up, man. It's always weird when like people actually watch the show
Yeah.
before they come on. It's a different conversation for sure.
Yeah.
So it's funny enough, these conversations don't always start at the beginning. They just kind of start with what's on my mind in some instances, right? And so, but no, for you, we'll start at the beginning. So,
Sure.
because you kind of first popped up in my corners of the comic book world because of the Milestone Initiative, right? I feel like I'm one of like three people that covers Milestone on a regular basis. And so when they started up the initiative, I was really excited about it. I had some friends that even applied. But then when that first class came out, I was like, okay, cool, that's dope. And then they put out the anthology. And so I was like, okay, we get to see like some of this work. And then we started seeing like opportunities actually coming out of it, right? You, Yasmin, Greg Burnham's getting work at DC. So there's a lot of names, even Cheryl. Cheryl's doing the Black Panther story at Marvel. That's
Yep.
coming up. So we're seeing a lot of names coming out of the Milestone Initiative and really starting to make noise in the industry. But I wanted to talk to you just about what came before that. What came before you kind of popped up on everybody's radar.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think I'll start with college.
Hmm.
Because in hindsight, I think I always wanted to be a writer, but I didn't realize that really growing up.
Hmm.
But in college, I realized because I wasn't a great student in high school. I didn't like school. I
Hmm.
just wanted to get out of there, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. But once I got to college, I took like an English course, and I was like, wait, I can actually write, and
Yeah.
maybe I can turn that into something. And I've always been a nerd into comic books and stuff like that. So when I did community college for the first couple of years, and I transferred up to San Francisco State,
Hmm.
and I got my bachelor's in creative writing. And that program was mainly geared towards fiction, poetry, and playwriting.
Mm,
And I love that program, and I wouldn't be here without it. But at the same time, I didn't want to do any of those things. I kind of geared towards playwriting a little bit because it made me realize that I liked writing scripts.
yeah.
So once I graduated, I kind of just hit the ground running. I knew I wanted to do comics, and I didn't really know how. And I was like, I guess I gotta like self-publish.
Hmm.
So I started going to conventions. I reached out to maybe a couple months after graduating, once I was trying to figure everything out. I reached out to David Walker.
Okay.
Um, I sent him a cold email. I'd
Hmm.
read one of his books. Like he published like a collection of essays
Hmm.
about his life and his kind of like getting into writing, and I really resonated with that. So I was like, let me just cold email this dude, see what happens.
Right.
And he answered me and he gave me some pointers. He was like, start off small, uh, write a bunch of short stories or short comics so you can kind of like do that process from beginning, middle to end, and then
Mm,
repeat over and over and over again. And it's quicker when you do something small, and then you don't want to do something too ambitious when you're first starting out either, because you can get too in the weeds on stuff.
mm,
He was like, start off with people at your same level too, and he's like, go to conventions, talk to artists, meet people at your level, and then just like get to it. So I really took that and I ran with it, started going to conventions and doing just that. And over the course of, I think I started this in maybe 2017.
mm,
Over the course of from 2017 to when did I apply to Milestone Initiative? 2024.
mm.
Uh, I self-published maybe 6 or 7 short comics ranging from like 5 to 13 pages.
Okay.
And I tried to do a different genre each time. I tried to work with a different artist each time. So then that way I'm getting my reps in, but I'm also learning to work with different types of artists
Mm,
who have different types of demands. Um, and then yeah, when as soon as the Milestone Initiative was announced, I was just like you. I was like, this is exciting. I've been waiting for this my entire life.
right.
Milestone is back, and I'm like, there's no way I can't apply to this because Milestone is it's as I'm sure it is for you, near and dear to me. Like
Yeah.
I didn't grow up on the Milestone comics, but I grew up on the Static Shock TV show. And then as
Same.
I started to get into comics, I went back and was reading Milestone, and I'm like, this is some great stuff.
Hmm.
They were really ahead of the curve, really.
Right.
So yeah, that's the background before the Milestone Initiative. That was a long-winded way of me saying just I was self-publishing for about 4 or 5 years,
Got
uh,
you.
doing my own thing.
So I'll ask this, right? Because for me, comics didn't exist as a kid. Well, my background, I'm in North Carolina. This is where I was raised, right? But my mother was raised in New York City. So I go visit my grandmother, every summer. I'm seeing comics like still at the newsstand, but the way I processed it was comics exist in New York and that's it,
Mm.
right? So I kind of rediscover comics as a grown man with kids. I walk into a comic shop for the first time in 2019, right? So all that to say, comic book writer is not a profession that even is in the realm of possibility for me as a kid. But I imagine it's like that for many of us, who are minorities, whether we're reading comics or not. Where do you first, I think the practical question, how do you even like start writing comic scripts? Like who breaks down, all right, write out this panel by this panel, and how does
Yeah.
that even come together for you?
Yeah, you're talking about when I first started out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's what's really it's a I'll say this. The comics community is great and
Hmm.
they're really forthcoming with like giving out information when people are kind of trying to break in. So
Hmm.
similar story, like I reached not reached out. No, I did. I met Gene Luen Yang,
Okay.
uh, who was writing Monkey Prince for DC. He wrote the Avatar comic books.
Hmm.
He did American Born Chinese. It just got adapted by Disney.
Yeah.
I met him at a comic book signing for Avatar because I'm a big Avatar fan, and I did
Hmm.
the same thing. I cold emailed him afterwards. I'm just like, hey, I'm trying to do what you do.
Hmm.
How do I do that? And he emailed me back, and he was like, he gave me 2 books to read, or 3 books actually. Sequential Art and Storytelling by Will Eisner,
Okay.
uh, On Writing by Stephen King,
Okay.
and then Understanding Comics by Scott McCloud. And they were
Mm,
all great books, but Understanding Comics like rewrote my DNA because it was
mm,
basically a book on how to make comics, but it was also a comic itself, and it was really meta.
mm,
Uh, and it taught you kind of everything that you needed to know from the scripting process to paneling to gutters, everything. And I'm
mm,
like, this is invaluable information. And obviously, as I'm sure you know, there is no uniform way to write a comic book script.
mm,
So I think when I was first starting out, that was hard for me because I couldn't just like point to one thing, like how in like screenwriting, you look at a script for a screenplay, everybody writes in the same way for the most part.
yeah, for the most part,
Comic book
right.
writing is a little bit different. You've got the way that Marvel does it, which is like you don't even really write your panels or dialogue or what
Mm,
kind of the artist kind of does things first off your description, and then you come in and letter or dialogue pass and narrate. And then there's DC that does it kind of the opposite, like you do everything
mm,
first. And that's kind of how I did it when I was first starting out. So I got lucky with that. But
mm,
it was kind of hard to figure that out. I'm not gonna lie, and I still like I can still learn and grow from it as well because, like I said before, every artist is different. So every artist demands something different from the way that you approach the script.
right.
Yeah,
Okay. Uh, so you were a comics fan for a while, right? Like, and you were, it's beyond, big two comics. So you're reading Avatar and stuff like that. What
yeah,
would you say were your influences or inspirations to start writing comics?
yeah. I think influence is a good word. So I have hemophilia, which is a bleeding disorder.
Mm,
Uh, the way that I like to describe it, and this is a comic book podcast, so it'll make sense, is
hmm.
you know how Wolverine has a healing factor and he heals from everything like instantaneously?
Right.
I'm like the exact opposite of that. I have
Mm,
like no healing factor. I don't even have like a regular healing factor that normal people have. So I just
mm,
I have to take like medicine to put the clotting factor in my blood that I'm missing to heal from
mm,
injuries. So growing up, I had a very sheltered upbringing. I couldn't
mm,
do a lot of the things that everyone else could do, and I was kind of stuck at home because I had an overprotective mom, understandably so.
right.
So this is gonna sound like this isn't the worst thing for a kid, but I was stuck at home watching TV, playing video games, or reading comic books
Yeah.
when I wanted to go out and play. But because of kind of what I couldn't do in life, I was like, okay, well, I love these worlds that are in comics, that are in video games, that are in TV, and
Mm,
they are kind of letting me, they're opening up a window to a place that I otherwise couldn't go to, right? And I think I really resonated with that and gravitated towards like how those stories affected me growing up and kind of helped me grow up. Uh,
mm,
and I got to a point where I was like, I think I would like to do that for somebody else within the
mm,
context of storytelling. And like I said before, I didn't realize that in the moment, but in hindsight, like I was making my own comics at like age 8, like writing it.
mm,
And like, so I think I always knew, I just didn't know that I knew.
right.
That makes sense. But it was definitely the influence was just like not being able to go out and do things. So I was kind of
Gotcha.
stuck, you know?
Now that makes sense. It's funny because my early memories with comics, I drew as a kid, and so when we were in New York, it's like it's not like I'm from the South and I'm from the suburbs in the South, right?
Mhm.
Like when I'm a kid, I take my bike and I can ride across the city if I want, right? In New York, my grandfather's like, if you go to the next block over and I catch you, that's it, right? And so it's like you either ride your bike behind the back alley of the row houses and then around the front yard, and that's pretty much it, or
Yeah.
you find something else to do. And so we had, the comics, and it helped because it's like it's a little bit cooler in the house. So we had the comics, and all I'm doing is like drawing or copying the latest Spider-Man cover onto some computer paper that I snuck out of my grandmother's fax machine, right? Um, but all that to say, right, it's funny how we sort of just kind of adapt to whatever it is we have around us, and sort of find solace in that. But like you said, you were reading comics, you're playing video games, and you really find yourself sort of exploring these worlds. What were your favorites at the time?
Oh man. So when I was really young and just getting into comics, I didn't really follow storylines. I
Hmm.
know my dad used to have this big bin in his garage, or not garage, in his basement.
Hmm.
And this was probably the late 90s at the time. So I would just gravitate towards like what cover I liked the best.
Hmm.
Honestly. Weirdly enough, I always did gravitate more towards DC comics growing up.
Mm.
But I think the earliest memory I have that kind of like made me realize comics are really dope.
Hmm.
Uh, um, was my dad had these comics. There were DC comics called Tangent Comics.
Hmm.
It was like a an imprint at DC that I think it was. I don't know whose imprint it was. I can look it up in a second. But basically, it was another universe.
Got you.
And it was all the recognizable names of the DC comic book characters that you knew, but they were reimagined origin stories. Like Superman was like this black dude with like a big cane. Like the Flash had light powers instead of like running fast. Like it was
Oh,
like, oh, so like the multiverse. That was like my first experience with the multiverse. I'm like, comic books were cool. And then I'm like, now there's these other worlds within comic books that are like really, really dope. So I think that was the
right.
thing that made me realize like the potential for comic books that I hadn't seen outside of comic books before. And it just like it whet my appetite for more, you know?
Wow. I just looked it up. Tangent Comics was the brainchild of Dan Jurgens.
Yes. That's what I was gonna say, but I didn't want to be wrong. So I
Gotcha.
didn't.
That's crazy. I love this because a lot of times the discourse about comics online is just one, it's toxic, but a lot of times you get this they'll try to sell the idea that like all of the newcomers in comics like don't love comics, were just plucked out of wherever. But it's like I've never spoken to anyone who hadn't loved comics like as a kid and
Yeah.
just didn't know how to get in. Um, so that's really cool. So, all right, so you go to school for creative writing. You know you want to write comics. You're stalking people at Comic Cons, cold emailing people, and you know you're
Yeah.
self publishing. Right. And then so the Milestone Initiative gets launched. I want to say that's what, 2021 they put out those
2020
applications.
was fall. I also want to. I overlooked a major part of my whole journey as well was Black Nerd Problems, which you mentioned earlier.
Mm,
Black Nerd Problems gave me the access at conventions to interview people, whereas like at that time, being absolutely nobody, it was impossible to get like a press pass. So
yeah.
like B&P gave me the access to get a press pass, so I could like interview a Scott Snyder or somebody like
Mm,
and just like pick their brain. I use that as a way to kind of just like yeah to give like other people insight, but it was also selfishly for me. Like I get to talk to Scott Snyder and ask him how he writes Justice League or Batman. Like I'm gonna do that.
right.
So that was
Yeah.
also very helpful for me as well.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, no, it's funny. I having a comic podcast, I get to talk to people that I did not dream I'd be able to talk to. And
Yeah,
I don't have like some secret goal of like being a comics writer. I just enjoy having these conversations and sort of documenting the
yeah,
culture, so to speak. But it does make things real and
yeah.
accessible in a way that I don't think a lot of, black and brown kids necessarily get.
That's true.
Like we tend to find comics from other media, right? Like Miles is big now because Spider-Verse is big.
Right,
Chadwick Boseman is what made me want to look for a Black Panther comic. Um, but being able to have like a real view of what the industry looks like. These are the people behind the scenes making it work. This is their approach to writing and storytelling. And then, like you said, most people are pretty forthcoming with information because ultimately, if you've got the talent, like they want to see you get a shot.
right.
So, gotcha. What were you saying?
I was just saying, absolutely, I agree.
Oh, gotcha. So, yeah. So the Milestone Initiative, um, the call goes out. They're gonna do what? 12 writers, 12 artists, and hey, apply. How did that go for you?
Yeah, it was a lot because I'm in grad school right now. I'm in,
Hmm.
I'm in my final semester of my grad program, and when the Milestone Initiative call went out, that was my first semester. Uh,
Mm.
So I was already in like a major like transition in my life because grad school was never on the horizon for me. Like after undergrad, I'm like, I'm done with school. I hate it. I don't ever
Right.
want to go back. Um, and then I found the perfect program that brought me back. But I was in the middle of just getting adjusted to that.
Mhm.
And then the Milestone Initiative call came out, and I'm like, I don't know if I can have any much more on my plate, but also like I can't not apply to this thing. Like this is
Right.
a once in a lifetime experience. Like we didn't even think Milestone was coming back. Now it's back, and now they're asking for submissions.
Yeah.
I gotta apply. So yeah, did you say I was the first person from the Milestone Initiative you're talking to, or have you talked to some?
Yes. No,
Okay,
it's
so
just you.
I'll give you a little bit of insight on just like the background on how the application process worked. I think I
Okay.
can do that. I guess we'll find out. I mean, if people applied, they know. So
Yeah.
when you applied, it was a lot like a regular job where they wanted like a resume. I think they wanted a cover letter or like a personal statement type of thing. Maybe not a cover letter,
Mhm.
like a personal statement. Um, but then they asked us to write. I think it was 8 pages, an 8 page story, and they
Mhm.
kind of gave us the prompt. Like for the writers on the writer side, I think the artist was a little different. They gave them a prompt too, but I think they had a little bit more freedom. But for the writers, they were just like, we want you to write a story with Icon and Rocket. Um,
Mhm.
and they were like, they should be having some type of argument in the story. And I'm like,
Mhm.
bet that's like a lot more of a prompt than I thought I was gonna get.
Right.
So I ran with it. I wrote a story about Rocket and Icon. They were in San Francisco because I love San Francisco. I lived up there for 7 years and I was still
Mhm.
missing it. I still miss it now, but I was really still missing it at the time. So I set them in San Francisco when um, they had to deal with an unhoused individual who was a metahuman. Uh,
Mhm.
and I kind of set them on two different arguments, whereas like Icon is, the more conservative one, and Rocket is the young, hothead who is, probably a little bit more politically savvy than an Icon is.
Right.
Uh, and yeah, wrote that story, turned it in with the application, and that was in like I want to say November.
Mhm.
Was the deadline around Thanksgiving. And around Christmas was when they called us in for interviews. And I was like, oh, this is real now. Like
Right.
during the interview, they're like, congratulations for getting this far. You've made it through such and such, however many applicants.
Mhm.
And during the interview, they asked us questions. They said they liked our story. And then they asked us like questions about who we would like to, like characters we'd like to write that
Mhm.
were milestone characters. Um, and we'll come back to this later, but I realized later that this was my pitch for Cyborg because
Mhm.
I talked about Cyborg during this interview, and my would-be editor Marquise was in that interview. Uh,
Wow.
so that interview went well, and then they're like, "We'll let you know in 2 weeks what's going on, like after Christmas, after the New Year." So then after the New Year, they reached back out and they're like, "Hey, we want to do another interview." And can I cuss on this podcast or no?
Yeah, you good.
Okay, I was like, fuck. I was like, another interview. 'Cause I've been through situations where I've gone on like 5 different interviews with the same company and then ultimately didn't
Yeah.
get the job. And I'm like, it's about to happen again. I thought I crushed the first interview. Now they want another one. That means the competition is like really, really good. I don't know if I can like muster up that energy again for another interview.
Right.
So I get on the second interview and they're like, we're gonna do this a little bit differently this time, which also set off my anxiety. I'm like, I didn't prepare for this. I prepared for interview questions. They're like,
Mhm.
we want you to watch this video, and
Mhm.
then we just want your honest reaction after the video. And I was like, okay, sure. So the video starts, and it's Reggie Hudlin congratulating me getting into the Milestone Initiative. Basically, they tricked
Wow.
us, and they did this for all of us. For the
Uh-huh.
writer, it was Reggie Hudlin. For the artist, it was Dennis Cowan, and it was just like they watched this video and they wanted an honest reaction because it was over
Mhm.
Zoom of us being freaked out that we got into the Milestone Initiative.
That's
Um,
crazy.
and honestly, I think I kind of had a subdued reaction because I was so like depleted from my anxiety. So I don't even think I was
Uh-huh.
like, screaming or anything. I was just like, this is dope. And it was. And then from that point, they were like, all right, you can't say anything for like till like March. And this was January.
Mm,
And that was insane to do because like
yeah.
that's 2 months. And
Right.
like, of course I told my family, but like I didn't tell any of my friends or anything because
Mm,
I'm like, at any moment they can take this away, and I don't want to now have to disappoint people that I've told, you know.
right.
But at the same time, I saw people online, like you said, you knew people that applied. I saw people that applied that didn't get in saying, "Oh, I just found out that I didn't get in," and I'm like, "Damn,
Yeah.
this sucks."
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's crazy. Um, so yeah, so you get into the Milestone Initiative. Um, and then how does that process work? Like, because I think the classes were virtual, right?
They were, yeah, because I mean, we're all over the country too, so
Right.
logistically, that was the only way we could have done it.
Mm,
Yeah, they were virtual. We met once a week. The writers met with Amy Chu.
mm,
Um, I believe the artist met with Tom Mandrake. I think that's his
mm,
name. And the whole when we first started, like right when they made the announcement that we were the class, they
mm,
also asked us to come up with 3 pitches for milestone characters that we want,
mm,
like stories that we would want to write. So we came up with those 3 pitches. We sent those in on the writer side, and they chose the best ones and told us you're gonna write this basically. So we
mm,
took those pitches to that writing class, and during that course we kind of like just workshopped it. And
mm,
Amy was teaching us about just how to write comic books
mm,
professionally and how to
mm.
turn our script into 8 pages basically. And we did that over the course of that course, which was
Got you.
about 10 weeks. I think we had to have it in kind of quick because comics is like a conveyor belt, so the artist couldn't
Yeah.
start until we were done with our script. So I think we had it in by week 4, and then they had
Okay.
the rest of the 6 weeks to draw.
Got you. I feel like I should back up for the audience, right? Because I'm a nerd and you're a writer. But the Milestone Initiative is a program that DC and Milestone did in partnership with Ally, which is a financial services company. And the whole point of the initiative was to find minorities who maybe were like on the edge of a career in comics or were interested in a career in comics and basically kind of pick some of the best and brightest and give them like some actual development, give them mentors in the industry, give them some structured learning with I would assume the goal to be like, okay, now you guys are good enough to like, be put on some books. That's not necessarily a guarantee of employment anywhere, but at least you've got the skills and you've got some connections now. You can kind of go from there and do with it what you will. Um, and so, but it's big because if you know anything about Milestone Comics and its original iteration, there are tons of comic creators that started at Milestone that right? Like
Yep.
John Paul Leon and Chris Cross and Umberto Ramos and John Rosen. Like there's so many
Joe,
names that
Joe
started
Illidge,
at Milestone. Yeah.
Joe Illidge as well. I don't know if was Priest doing stuff before Milestone, but I know he was part of that original group as well.
Yeah. Priest was an editorial in comics before Milestone, but he was a big part of the foundation of
Yeah.
that world. Um, but yeah, there's like a ridiculous amount of names that
Yeah.
you would know if you're a comics fan that have their first credits in a Milestone book, like Chris Sotomayor, who is still coloring comics like on a regular basis.
He colored about half the stories in that Milestone Initiative book that we put out. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's crazy. Tommy Lee Edwards. There's a lot of names that
Yeah.
start at Milestone, and so that's a big part of their legacy is putting on sort of the next generation of talent, and it's dope because a lot of those names are minorities, right? They are whether it's gender minorities, identity minorities, or race minorities, or just diversity of thought, right? There's a huge diverse cast of characters that came through the Milestone offices in the 90s. And so them being able to pay it forward in this way and find a new crop of talent in like this digital world where you can pull talent from all over the country
Yeah,
is really cool.
definitely.
So yeah, I just wanted to give the listeners context in case they didn't know what the Milestone Initiative
Yeah,
was.
yeah.
So you've got this pitch, you write your stories, they get passed to the artist. So there's like a sort of class project, if you will,
Yeah.
um, that we could actually see. They published it.
Yep.
The DC New Artist Showcase is what they called it.
New talent showcase. Yeah.
New Talent Showcase. Um, but yeah, so you can actually read those stories. And what remind me, what was your story about?
Mine was with it was a solo story with Rocket,
Mm,
where she was dealing with she was fighting Puff and Shiv from if you
uh-huh.
remember them from the animated series. And they were dealing with like a conflict of a another person that lived in the housing project that they lived in. And she was
Gotcha.
kind of working as like an intermediary between this guy that lives there and Puff and Shiv that are like shaking him down.
Got you.
Yeah.
So what's cool about the Milestone Initiative is like, from what I understand, you guys all got paired with like just mentors. Who were some of your mentors?
Yeah, we got paired. So whoever you were working with as an artist, you and the artist had the same mentor.
Okay.
Uh, so me and my artist Taya were working with Cully Hamner, who is
Okay.
the co-creator of the Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle.
Hmm.
And he was great. He had just a lot. He's more of an artist than he is a writer, but just
Hmm.
getting insight from him from that professional standpoint helped me as a writer, just like how I can approach my scripts to
Hmm.
make it easier for the writer or to give them breathing room to
Hmm.
kind of, to cook, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was great. We hopped on Zoom I feel like every other week as we were
Mm,
going through the process. Yeah.
nice. So so yeah, so you get, I think that's the coolest part about the Milestone Initiative is like you're getting, this mentorship from professionals, and it's not just like, oh, I'm some dude that wrote a comic once, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's like the names, right? Like
Right.
Cully Hamner. um I know Yasmin worked with Francis Manipul, like
Mhm.
just like some really iconic names in the
Absolutely.
industry. It's like a who's who. What would you say is like the biggest lesson you took away from your time sort of absorbing from all these different people?
Oh man, that's a great question. Um, so there's so many. Uh, I think the biggest lesson, at least the one that's bubbling up to my head right now,
Mm,
is kind of what I mentioned a minute ago. It's just as a writer, you kind of need to obviously the conveyor belt starts with you, but
mm,
you this is a visual medium,
yeah,
and you have to give the artist as much room as they need slash want to flex.
right.
So like, don't get too in the weeds on paneling
Mm,
because more often than not, the artist is going to have a better visual sensibility than you do.
right.
So, and they're probably going to have to change what you put down anyway because it doesn't make any sense.
Mm,
Like just like a shot standpoint or an angle standpoint, or even just like I put too many panels on the page. Like you need to let them breathe. So like, to give an example, if Puff and Shiv are fighting Rocket on a particular panel, that panel shouldn't be 5 sentences. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah,
You don't need to be that detailed when you're writing it. Puff swings at Shiv or Puff swings at Rocket. That's it, and then they can interpret that in their own way.
right. Right. Wow, cool. So yeah, because I would think like just kind of growing up as a writer, you're used to putting a lot of words on the page,
Yeah,
but it's a whole different thing because like you said, comics are such a visual medium, and I think we've all got experience opening up a comic and just being like, yo, this is a wall of text. Like this is this is crazy.
yeah,
Um, some names come to mind, but I won't do that. But
probably
yeah,
not the same ones.
right, right. So that's dope. So you come out of that experience, right? You obviously you feel like you're a better writer having gone through it, at the very least a more competent comics writer, after coming through the program. But like, what does graduation look like? What are you hoping for at the end of the process like that?
Graduation was anxiety. I
Mm,
think honestly, the whole thing was anxiety because, at least for me, I can't speak for anyone else, but I'm like, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, but it's gonna end, and I don't know what comes afterwards.
mm,
And if I'm being honest, like again, speaking for me, I had a great time during the Milestone Initiative, and I think they did their due diligence when it comes to trying to get us opportunities afterwards. But in the
mm,
moment, we weren't sure what was gonna if that was gonna be the case because not just at DC, just talent development programs in general in comics, like a lot of times they'll come out, there'll be some hype around them, and then like you never hear from any of those creatives again.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
it's really rare that names come out of those things, and I think DC knew that, and then obviously having this be more focused on Black and Brown and underrepresented voices, they knew that that couldn't happen with this particular thing because
right,
that was going to be bad.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, I mean, I'll say that at least speaking for myself, when things ended, I had no idea what was coming.
mm,
Um, I was like, this is a great opportunity. I have all these contacts now, and obviously, they gave us all the editors' emails at DC, so they're like, please reach out to us. We want to give you work, but
mm,
work wasn't guaranteed. So I think I kind of went back to that grind mode when I first started out, and I'm
mm,
like, all right, I guess I'm sending out emails again.
right,
I'm gonna go back to conventions, but now I get to go to the DC party at San Diego Comic Con, um,
mm,
and actually speak with editors. That's a
right,
that's a in that I had before, so that's what I did. Um, this is fast forwarding a couple months because Milestone
mm,
Initiative ended in May. Also, to rewind a little bit, after we did our online like course, they
mm,
flew everybody out to Burbank, and we did a 1 week summit
wow,
at the DC offices essentially, and
nice,
that was dope. Like we all got to be in one space, and I live in
mm,
LA, which is like 15 minutes away from Burbank,
uh,
but they still put me up in a hotel, which was nice. Like I didn't have to come home every night. Um,
nice,
but yeah, like just kind of getting to be around everyone that I'd been seeing on Zoom for the past 10 weeks. And then we got to see Reggie and Dennis every day. And they
okay,
were dropping gems of knowledge on us all day, every day. We would go out to eat with them afterwards, every night as well. Um, and then we got to hang out at the DC offices and see like, Batman statues and Green Lantern rings and stuff like that. It
right,
was incredible. And they had kind of like a whole week of just like seminars planned for us
okay,
that kind of was geared towards like launching us into this because this
mm,
was like the cap of the whole thing, right?
got you,
It was geared towards launching us into the industry, but like we all knew at the end of it, like the onus was on us.
yeah,
You know, that's the thing about comics, like it's different than TV or film. Like you can have an agent or management, but you don't need to. And for the most part, you're kind of like getting work on your own,
right,
at least especially when you're starting out. So like they told us like you're gonna have to reach out to us if you want work.
mm,
So going back to what I was saying before, that's what I did. I all the self-published comics that I did for years
mm,
were all in a digital space. So I worked diligently for like a month and a half before San Diego Comic Con, and I printed them all in one book. So I
mm,
had about 3 or 4 shorts that I printed in one book. So when I went to San Diego Comic Con and I had access to editors now, I was like, hey, here's this book of all my work before the Milestone Initiative. You know about my work during the Milestone Initiative. Here's
right,
just another example of some of the stuff I can do. And I was just handing them
got you,
out. And I'm like, they probably threw them away, but whatever. The interaction is
uh,
what they remembered.
right,
And then I followed up with everyone that I talked to at San Diego Comic Con with an email saying, hey, it was great to talk with you. Also, here's a digital version of that comic book, just in case you misplaced it.
right,
Um, and then I reached out to Marquise Draper, who ended up being my editor on Cyborg, because he wasn't at
mm,
San Diego Comic Con. But I was
mm,
just like, I worked with him a little bit on my story for the new talent showcase. And
mm,
I was like, I'd love to work with you if you ever have any work. I'm more than willing. I would love to do something. And from there, he hit me back and he was like, we're doing this thing called DC Power. And
mm,
he's like, I remember when you talked about Cyborg during your interview, and I would love if you could write a Cyborg story. And I was like, I'm in there. I'm doing
right,
it. so I did it.
Wow. Okay, so let's go back then. So what was your pitch for Cyborg?
So, okay, so I didn't pitch it in a traditional sense,
Uh-huh.
but when going back to that initial interview during the Milestone Initiative, when they asked us what characters we wanted to write,
Hmm.
I basically just, as I'm doing now, as you can see, I'm kind of long-winded sometimes. I I talked about Cyborg because Cyborg has been a character that I've loved since I was a kid because obviously he's someone that looks like me. He's black, right? But also he's a character that is differently abled, and
Yeah.
we don't see that as well. And coming from, I don't have metal appendages like Cyborg, but I'm differently abled as well.
Right.
And I had been seeing Cyborg, through the lens of how much potential that he had that I
Mm.
hadn't thought that he lived up to that point. So
Gotcha.
when they asked about that in the interview, that's kind of what I talked about. I'm just like, with Cyborg being, essentially a disabled superhero, we haven't really seen that to the depths that we should be seeing that.
Mm.
And I'm like, I would love to tackle that. I would love to tackle what it looks like to be as a superhero, to be a black man that kind of like survived this trauma, and
Hmm.
what that looks like in the 21st century. I was saying all this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that's what Marquise was harkening back to when he's like, I remember that interview. I would love to give you the chance to write Cyborg for this DC Power anthology. So
Okay.
I'm like, yep. So it wasn't really a pitch. It was just me being passionate about the character and what I wanted to see. And I
Right.
guess that struck a chord with him.
That's funny. My uncle used to do marketing for Atlantic Records.
Mhm.
Um, and basically his claim to fame in the building, as we call it, was he was the person responsible for getting Brandy a website. But the way he got the job was like it was just this super passionate argument, like, and people don't think that black people use the internet, but like we love computers too, and da 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 da. It's just funny. You telling that story, that's what that reminded me of.
That's so funny.
Um, but it's crazy what like just sort of because all that really is advocating for yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
this is a story I'm familiar with. It hasn't been told correctly up until this point. Let me show you why I know enough to tell it
Yeah.
correctly, you
Absolutely.
know. Um, so I'm looking at wait, I'm looking at the wrong one. I'm looking at DC Power 2024, which you wrote the foreword for,
Yes.
right? But your story in DC Power 2023, I really enjoyed. It's Cyborg with his mother. And I think ultimately my takeaway from it was, oh, that's why he says booyah.
Yeah.
But it was just a really dope just sort of day in the life, a look at who he was before, who he is now. um what was your idea for that story, or how did you decide that was a story you were going to tell in this short anthology?
Yeah, it's crazy because comics sometimes, most of the time, I'll say, is everything's always behind and there's never enough time.
Hmm.
So I think in hindsight, I had a little bit more time than some other people to work on that story, but this was my first thing. So I'm like, it felt really fast. So
Right.
he reached out, he asked me if I can do a cyborg story. I said, yeah. He's like, yeah, can you give me like some ideas within the next week? I'm like, that's real fast, but like, yeah, sure, I can. Um, but yeah, I wanted to tackle, I think even going to my cyborg miniseries, I think my whole view of cyborg is the human aspect of him because I think we focused too much on the duality of am I a
Hmm.
man or am I a machine? Like I feel like it's such a tired argument,
Yeah.
especially moving into the 21st century. And the way that I view the character is like someone who has a disability.
Hmm.
That's not an argument or a conversation I want to have anymore. It's
Hmm.
this is my reality. How do I overcome? How do I navigate?
Yeah.
As a human. And so
Hmm.
I wanted to focus on that, and I wanted it to feel grounded in the respect that like he is a human being, right?
Right.
So that was the main thing I wanted to do going into it. And then I just thought of like all of like the arguments I'd seen about Cyborg online over the years. And one of the things that I thought of was Booyah being such a understandably like maligned term that people don't
Yeah.
like Cyborg uses. I don't
Hmm.
think he ever used it in the comic books before the TV show.
Right.
Um,
I don't think so either.
it's a kids' TV show. They're like, give him a catchphrase. I don't think they thought too much about it, but obviously, a black character saying something like that, it's
Hmm.
just like, what are we doing here? Why is he saying that? Like, I understand the argument. So I was like, maybe I can use this as a way to provide context as
Hmm.
to why he says it. So, going forward as a writer, whoever writes Cyborg, they can say it or not, but at least now we know that there's a reason.
Yeah.
Because using a phrase like that as a black character, like without a reason, just seems real irresponsible, I think.
Yeah. 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 That's a good way to put that.
So I'm like, let me at least give it a reason, and then whoever takes it from here, they can take it or leave it. But at least now in the canon, there's a reason, and I
Yeah.
tie that to his mom, because Cyborg stories focus usually more on the dad.
Hmm.
Oh, you turned me in Cyborg, you did all
Right.
this stuff to me, but
Right.
like he also in that he lost his mother,
Yeah.
and we don't focus on that enough. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I wanted to kind of jumble all those things together, and you got the story of Booyah.
Nice. Yeah. And all right. So we get the Booyah story. How does that turn into a miniseries? Or was
Again,
it that straightforward?
from my perspective, it wasn't. I
Okay.
knew I knew going back to just when the Milestone Initiative started, every
Hmm.
milestone, pun intended, that I hit, I'm like, okay, I don't know what's coming after this, so
Hmm.
I have to give 150% on this current thing that I'm doing, because I at least want it to be a domino effect to turn into other opportunities, right?
Right.
So when I got the DC Power story, I'm like, I need to cook, I need to do everything I possibly can with these 8 pages that I'm
Hmm.
given, and hopefully that will turn into something else. But it wasn't like Marquise told me, hey, if you do a good job, you're going to get a series. None of that was on the horizon for me. I don't know what was going on for him, but I didn't know anything.
Right.
So I'm focusing on one thing at a time. So I'm writing the story, and then I think I wrote it in August, and art was coming in from August through like December-ish. So
Hmm.
as that's happening, I'm doing like lettering passes as the art's coming in,
Okay.
uh, and tweaking stuff here or trimming stuff here if I wrote too much.
Hmm.
Um, December comes around. Marquise hits me up. Oh, and they've already announced them out, or the Cyborg series at this point. They announced the
Mm.
Cyborg series in like November. And I
Yeah.
was like, damn, that would have been dope if I could have wrote that. But like I
Right.
remember they announced it and they had no creative team.
Yeah. It was TBD
Um,
for Dawn of DC.
yeah. So December, first week of December of 2022,
Mm.
Marquise reaches out to me. He's like, hey, you want to hop on a phone call? And I was like, that's weird. You've never asked me that question before. I'm like,
Right.
I'm thinking it's like another like lettering pass for the Booyah story.
Hmm.
He calls me up and he's like, hey, I don't know if you saw, but we're doing this Dawn of DC thing at DC. And I'm like, yeah, I saw that, but I have no idea what it is. And he's
Hmm.
like, well, Cyborg's one of the things, and we don't have a creative team for it. But you're one of the people that I'm thinking of, or at least I heard you're one of the people that I'm thinking of. And I was like, that's insane.
Hmm.
I would love to do that. And he's like, yeah, why don't you put some ideas together? And doesn't have to be super formal or anything. Just like put some ideas together and we'll hop on a call in like a week. And I'm like, great. So I'm thinking like I'm gonna be competing with however many people they've got in mind for this book.
Yeah.
Uh, 'Cause I've heard a little bit about that with Amy Chu, who wrote the Poison Ivy book.
Hmm.
That's kind of what put her on the map at DC at the time. And she had said that it was a process where it was like a couple people were in the running for it.
Yeah.
And she had just had a pitch that blew people away, so they gave it to her. And I'm like, okay, this is probably the same situation for
Right.
Cyborg. I got to knock these ideas out of the park yet again. But he was like, yeah, he was like, you were one of the people I was thinking of because I really enjoyed your story for DC Power, and he was my editor on that.
Hmm.
He wanted to give me the opportunity to kind of expand upon that.
Yeah.
So I sent him a doc. It was probably like 3 or 4 pages. It was just like honestly bullet pointed ideas of stuff that I wanted to take from the story I did, and then some other stuff that like I had just been thinking about for years about what we could do with the character.
Hmm.
And I hopped on the call with him, and the call was going more. It was more conversational than I thought it was going to be,
Hmm.
and I clarified with him, or he clarified with me that like it was just me, like there wasn't anybody else, and I was like,
Mm.
oh, I didn't know.
Wow.
That took like the monkey off my back, so to speak. And then I'm like, okay, now I can just like relax and we can actually figure this thing out. But yeah, again, to be long-winded to answer your question, I think maybe for him, he had kind of had some ideas that maybe that I could be someone that could write this book, but I had absolutely no idea whatsoever. And so he reached out early December.
Got you. Man, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, we'll have to have another conversation about Marquise, or we'll
Yes.
talk about him a little bit later on in this episode. But so Cyborg, the DC Power story comes out, and I'm like, that was a dope story. It doesn't hurt that Valentine Delandro did your art. Like, it was just a dope story.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know, man. Like we have this conversation in like the sort of black comics spaces of YouTube, and it's like, what value do these anthologies have, right? And an obvious selling point is, well, there's up and coming talent that gets spotlighted usually in these. In the case of Marvel Voices, we're also getting sort of historical context and archiving that we have not gotten before. So
Yeah.
people can now see, oh, there's a path. There are other people that have done this before. Maybe I can do this. Right. But, from an editorial standpoint, most of the time, the stories are in their own little pocket universes. And it's not like most of these stories are a bridge to some other series or opportunity. So it's like they're kind of one and done stories. It's on a premium price tag. I'll buy it because it's Black History Month. And I
Yeah.
think your story is unique in that it came at the right time. DC was looking to expand the line after a long time of it just being Batman everything.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have an editor who believes in you and just wants to see you win. I think that's just sort of a perfect storm of events
Yeah.
that leads to where we are now, which is just really dope. Um, so all that to say, that leads us to 6 issues of Cyborg. Um, First of all, we'll get into your pitch, but every issue title is a song title. Where'd
Yes.
that come from?
That came from, thank you for noticing, even though I did tweet about it a lot. But I think that came from, I think a lot of my process is music, just in
Yep.
general. Like I listen to a lot of music. My favorite parts of music are the narrative aspects of music. And
Mm,
I feel like a lot of times when I'm listening to music, I just like make up scenes that this song could exist in, or that this title could share thematically with something.
right.
Um, so it came from that, just like that being kind of my own sensibility. And then
Mm,
also knowing that this story was going to be in Detroit, which is, the history of Motown.
right.
And that I'm like, music has to be a part of this series, even though this is not an auditory medium. It
Right.
has to be part of this series in some way.
Mm,
Um, so it was those two things. And then um, I figured, yeah, like the song titles could also yield towards what the theme of the issue was going to be as well.
mm,
And then you can go and listen to this song and kind of get like you're getting closer to Vic at the same time.
right. Cool. That's dope. No, because before I was in the comics, I was an aspiring music producer. I was a beat maker. My record collection, before I traded it, well, I didn't trade it. My records are in storage. I just decided to display comics since I have a comic YouTube channel.
Yeah,
But my collection's like 1,300 deep, and it's mostly
crazy.
like goes from Motown to Stax, even like CTI, and like just anyway. That's a
Yeah,
whole different conversation. But I noticed that I was like, yeah, that's dope. Because not a lot of people are doing that. But so every issue title is a song title. But I think just overall, what struck me about your Cyborg, and maybe it's also because our last sort of image of Cyborg is Ray Fisher, right? And I think the commentary around his Justice League portrayal, at least the Justice League that we got before the Snyder cut, was like, yo, why is this dude so mad?
yeah, yeah,
like he was just angry.
right.
And so the Cyborg series that you wrote, it, like you said, it definitely like places Victor in a sort of human element, right? He's in therapy, he's getting adjusted, but early on we get a very like a much more emotionally balanced Vic. He's still learning to cope. He's got some trauma he's got to deal with. He's lost his father, and that comes with a complicated set of emotions, right? Like losing a parent that you're estranged from. Like, how do
Yeah.
you process that? How do you deal with that? Um, but we just get early on. It's like, oh, this is a different Cyborg series. What was your sort of I don't know. I'll say your thesis. What was your sort of thesis for the character, and what did you kind of want people to come away from or the story with?
Yeah, that's a great question. It My thesis for the character was to kind of go back to what I said before was that
Mhm.
Victor is a human.
Yeah.
And from this point forward, at least if I have anything to say about it,
Yeah.
that's how it's going to be. We're making a big step forward, and I don't want to take a step back anymore.
Hmm.
And a lot of that was rooted in what we did with Silas, and taking him off the board, because I also think as tired as the conversation of is the am I a man or a machine, it's also tired that he's had these daddy issues for 40 years as well.
Right.
Which is fine. People have issues with their parents, but it's like it's the same beat over and over and over and over and over again, you know?
Yeah.
I was like, at the end of this series, I want Cyborg to be, staunchly in the 21st century for one.
Hmm.
'Cause I think I'm the first millennial to write a Cyborg comic book, which is
Hmm.
crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, so staunchly in the 21st century, no more conversation on what he is, and he's going to have the beginnings of working through his trauma with his father. Those were my three goals for
Hmm.
that. And I went in like that. I went into that like with the pitch process with that with Marquise. I'm like, this is what I want to do,
Hmm.
uh, and he was all on board with that. And I think going back to having what you said before about it, just having an editor that believes in you is, Cyborg books. There hasn't been that many to
Right.
be frank. Also, I think this is technically the third volume.
Hmm.
There was one that came out in the late 2000s that was called DC Special
Yeah.
Cyborg, and I don't think that counts as volume one. I think
Yeah.
volume one is David Walker's, uh,
Mm.
and then volume two was John Semper's. But just kind of knowing kind of the behind the scenes stuff about at least David Walker's, which he's been very outspoken about, was, you know, there's a lot of stuff that he wanted to do with that book that he couldn't do. And then there's a lot of stuff that the editors wanted him to do that he didn't want to do.
Mm.
So I just want to say that like my cyborg book is on the backs of all of the hurdles that the previous writers had to go through to
Yeah.
tell a decent story, Because I think a lot of times people just see like they'll see a book and they'll be like, man, that could have been so good. And they don't realize all the intangibles as to why it wasn't, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, and it really is like going back to what you said, a perfect storm of like a publisher believing in you and then your editor believing in you. And not just that, like Marquise being a black editor,
Hmm.
there's stuff that I pitched for this book that I didn't need to have a conversation to convince him about. Like he just understood.
Right.
And that's important.
For sure. For sure. Um, yeah. There's a really dope interview with Ryan Coogler. I want to say it was for Marvel. They did like a making of Wakanda Forever.
Hmm.
And he talks about having a black producer
Hmm.
reach out to him. And he was like, there's this initial conversation they have. He's like, oh snap, like, are you black? And the dude's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm black. And it's like, oh, okay, now we can have a conversation on
Yeah.
a different level.
Yeah.
But it's true, there are cultural nuances. I think when we have conversations about representation, I think a lot of times, I don't know if it's actually the way it comes across or if it's just that's the takeaway certain people want to take from it. But it's like we want to take over the world and it's a mutiny and, forget anyone else who's ever sat in this seat before.
Yeah.
We're just coming for everything. Right.
Right.
But it really is. it's so much of it is intangible and it's difficult to explain, but we live in this sort of world where what we do is often predetermined by how we think someone will react to whatever it is we're doing,
That's true.
right? You know, you see somebody walking down the street. Okay, let me like, straighten up, try not to look threatening. Let me not wear my hood in this building, even though it's cold. Like, there's so many things that we do as a reaction
Yeah.
because we're very much aware of the perceptions around us. So it's definitely it's refreshing to be able to walk into a space and feel like you, at the very least, don't have to explain your humanity to a person. You know,
Absolutely.
um, so yeah, no, it's dope that Marquise is in the position that he's in, and is willing to look out and say, hey, here's an opportunity, and it's for you, and not because hey, I just want to give another black man a nod, but it's
Right.
like no, you had an idea that made a lot of sense. I want to give you a shot to express that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. You hit it right on the
So,
head.
well, thanks. But nah, so yeah, so Cyborg, it's a very human story. It's Vic dealing with trauma, but not, for lack of better terms, trauma porn, right? It's not, we're not throwing things at Victor to see how angry he'll get and how the anger helps him overcome it. Like I said, it's very well adjusted, um, and is a more mature Vic than we've seen in previous iterations. Um, I reread the story today, and I think my favorite part of it, I can't really say what I like without spoiling it, but what I came away from it with is really just like everything you said, right? Like you really set the stage for him to sort of be him. Like we don't have to have these identity struggles. We don't have to
Yeah.
have these trauma struggles. Like there's a moment where he sort of explains why he feels he belongs on the Teen Titans or the Titans as they're called. And it's like, yes, this makes sense. Like, and I love that you put him firmly in the Titans as opposed to the Justice League. Like
Yeah.
that made a lot of sense as well. So there's a lot that I like about the series. Do you know if there's any more coming?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
I can be as honest as possible with that. I don't know what I can say, so
Hmm.
I won't say much, but I will say I want to do more. And I
Okay.
think it's definitely set up that there will be more, or there could be more. Not, don't say will. I didn't mean to say will.
Right.
It's definitely set up that there could be more.
Yeah.
I think, we did a really good job of building a new world for Vic,
Yeah.
uh, in the 21st century, so to speak. And I approached this series, like I said, with everything else that I did, like, okay, this is my one and only shot. I don't know if I'm
Right.
going to do this again. What's great about that is I always knew I was going to get 6 issues, so I knew I got to tell a full story. Because I used
Hmm.
to, like when I was still just a fan back in the day, it used to be devastating when a book would get like canceled and they could never finish their run, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the other side of not knowing if you're like not being an ongoing is
Hmm.
sure you're going to get to tell a complete story. Um, but honestly, everything is about sales.
Yeah.
And to be frank, I don't know what Cyborg sold because I didn't ever want to like, I didn't want that to dictate how I was writing, so I didn't ask.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I knew I'd know if it was over what they expected or if it was under. So I
Yeah.
figured it's about what they expected. But the truth of the matter is, like, if you're not a Batman book, it is harder to be a book on the shelves. Whether it's however good your book is and however many people like it, nothing's going to do Batman numbers.
Right.
So yeah, I think I would love to do more. I would write Cyborg forever if they let me. So
Right.
it's just about if they want to let me.
Right. Right. Nah. So just getting into like just nerdy stuff, right? I think my favorite aspect of the run, like the sort of running joke, one, you're in every issue.
Yeah.
uh, but the do better Detroit segments,
Yeah.
what was the inspiration for those?
The inspiration for that was I needed kind of a chorus to express some of the real world view of
Hmm.
Cyborg,
Hmm.
to kind of talk about both sides of the argument of like, man, this dude is so dope, but like he's not doing what he needs to be doing.
Right.
And like so it's kind of a meta commentary of just like what I've wanted to see from the character for
Yeah.
all these years. So I used like Estelle Green and Do Better Detroit to kind of like within the context of the story to be like, yo, bro, like you're not out here like you should be out here. You need to be here. You need to be doing better.
Right.
Uh, so it was a way for me to to express that, and I just ran with it and had fun because like anytime you can put like a comment section somewhere, like it's fun.
It was great. It's great. And like this, it's a cyborg book, right? So I don't know how much anybody's going to believe me when I say it's not like this is like a black book for the sake of blackness,
Yeah,
right? But it's also very much a black book, like because of these comment sections. Like
yeah,
it's like the comments are for the culture. Maybe that's the best way to put that,
yeah.
right? And so we get like comments like, "Oh man, like who lined this dude up?" Like it is just hilarious. It is hilarious going through these comments.
And
Um,
another, I'm just gonna throw another testament to Marquise is like he didn't bump on any of that. Like what
mm,
you see is what I wrote in the script. Like he didn't like there's some stuff that maybe had to get cut just for spacing, but
yeah,
like nothing was like, hey, we can't put that in here. Like he let me do it, which was great.
that's crazy, man. That's cool. That's cool. Okay. So I already asked if there's any more cyborg coming. We can't answer that question. We don't really know. So, we're not holding any information back. But you are writing more than just cyborg. Tell us about Star Trek.
Yeah, man. So I'm also a big Trekkie. I'm a new Trekkie.
Okay.
I'll say since the pandemic. I've
Mm,
become a Trekkie. When I was basically at home for 7 months, not working, I used to get on my stationary bike
hmm.
and just watch Star Trek for 8 hours a day. So I watched like the
Wow.
entirety of the franchise during the pandemic, like all the shows, all the movies, and I fell in love. 'Cause my dad's a big Trekkie, and I've
Mm,
always, growing up, I was more of a Star Wars person.
yeah.
And now that I am a Trekkie, like there's no comparing. They're completely different franchises. I don't know why we have this
Mm,
argument, but I fell in love with Star Trek, particularly Deep Space Nine. Uh,
okay.
I'm not sure how privy you are to with Star Trek as a franchise, but
Yeah. So we had, again, those same summers in New York
yeah,
watching Saturday morning cartoons, and you knew the Saturday morning cartoons were over when Star Wars or Star Trek TNG, The Next Generation came on.
yeah,
And it was like, we might watch it a little bit because the Klingon dude kind of looked black.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it was kind of it.
Got you, got you. Well, yeah, I'll go into so my favorite Star Trek show was Deep Space Nine. And
Mm,
what was great about that show is it subverted the expectations of what Star Trek could be up until that point.
mm,
Uh, Star Trek was always a show about exploration and diplomacy between the new types of people that you meet through exploration.
mm,
Deep Space Nine. So like basically with Star Trek before that, every episode was like on a different planet or meeting different aliens, all that type of stuff. Because they
mm,
were traveling. Deep Space Nine was a stationary show. It was on a station, so all the conflict or diplomacy came to them, which was
uh,
completely different to Star Trek up until that point. And also, most importantly, it was the first black captain in Star Trek,
mm,
or at least first black captain to headline a television show. Um,
gotcha.
and he was a single father. Um, he was also raising his father or his son to be his own man. It
Mm,
was really, I mean, Star Trek has always been rooted in being progressive, but like
yeah,
even in the 90s, like this was like way ahead of its time for
yeah.
television. And me watching this in what was 2020 at this point, I'm like, this is incredible.
Mm,
So fast forward to all the comic book stuff. Honestly, this opportunity came out. I'm very lucky in a very similar way than the Cyborg opportunity came out.
Hmm.
Me and my friend Dorado Quick, who was also part of the Milestone Initiative,
Yes.
we about a year and a half ago were doing these like monthly hangouts with Jackson Lansing, who writes
Okay.
basically everything at this point with Colin Kelly. They write every book basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, we met him at San Diego Comic Con months prior, and then we were like, "Oh, we're all in LA. We should like hang out." So we started to like have lunch like once a month, just to kind of like be comic book people and hang out and pick each other's brains and all that type of stuff.
Mm,
And we started hanging out around the time that his and Colin's Star Trek book was about to start. And
mm,
I'm like, yo, and this Star Trek book was featuring Captain Sisko, who was the captain from Deep Space Nine. And I'm like, bro, you are doing exactly what I want to be doing. You're writing
mm,
Cisco, you're writing Star Trek. This is absolutely incredible. I'm so excited for the book. Um, so we just started talking about Star Trek, and I picked his brain a little bit. We were talking about favorite episodes. And then he asked me my favorite episode. And honestly, this happened the exact same way that Cyborg happened. I
mm,
just started talking about my favorite episode for like a half an hour. Uh,
mm,
and it happened to be that my favorite episode had to do with Captain Sisko's son, whose name is Jake.
mm,
Um, it's kind of a one-off episode. I won't go too into detail about what it is, but
mm,
I basically spoke about Jake and how much I appreciated and resonated with him as a character because he was basically the son of a military man who became a writer, and his father didn't pressure him to join Starfleet or join the military or any of that. And I
mm.
resonated with Jake because I'm the same way. My dad was a
Right.
career Marine, um,
Mm,
and even though I have a bleeding disorder and I couldn't join the military, I never felt that pressure that I needed to kind of follow in his footsteps. And then I ultimately became a writer too. So I'm like, I really resonate with Jake Sisko.
mm,
And I guess I was really passionate about it. And Jackson was like, look, the Star Trek books that we're doing are really successful. We're thinking about spinning them out into other things. And if you're interested, I will put your name in the hat of people that we might reach out to when we get to that point. And I was like, absolutely, I would love that. And I didn't think anything was going to come of it.
mm,
He was being nice. Fast forward 2, 3 months down the line, he calls me out of the blue and he was like, remember I brought up those spinoff series? We're having a conversation with our editorial right now. And I wanted to make sure you're still down to pitch for this. And I was like, please, 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 please.
right.
Um, a week later, my editor, at that point wasn't my editor, but Heather Antos reaches out and she's like, hey, I heard you're interested in doing some stuff on Star Trek. We know you like Jake Sisko.
Mm,
Uh, would you like to pitch on it? And I was like, yep. So she gave me about a month to pitch on it, and I gave them like 5 pitches. Same thing.
mm,
Again, the theme of all of this is like, I don't know if this is the last opportunity I'm ever going to get. I'm
right.
swinging the fucking fences. So
Yeah.
that's what I did. And they liked my pitches, and sure, I got lucky. They liked this was different than Cyborg, where this was more of a traditional pitch process.
Yeah.
With Marquise on Cyborg, it was like, oh, we'll just talk it out and fill it out and, kind of skirt it out from there.
Right.
But this was like, I'm coming up with, launching points for ideas. So they have to
Yeah.
be detailed and they have to have potential more than just like bullet points.
Mm,
Um, but she emailed me back and she's like, they liked my pitches and they thankfully liked the one that I liked the most. Uh,
nice.
and yeah, we just kind of ran from it. But it was, I will say, writing Star Trek was a completely different experience than Cyborg.
Mm,
Not in a bad way, but just I got to see comics in a different light.
yeah. So obviously Cyborg's a big DC character, right? And it's like that you've got like all sorts of legal approvals. He was just a movie and so on, right? But Star Trek is like a different thing. It's a licensed property
Yeah,
for, one of the smaller publishers. Like I'm assuming there's more levels you got to go through
yeah.
to get story approved. How was that adjustment for you?
It was a big adjustment, especially because like with Cyborg, that was the first time I'd gone through that process at all. So like
Yeah.
even after writing Cyborg, I'm like, I still don't feel like a pro at this. I'm still learning.
Mm,
And now I'm on this other book that's like you said, a licensed property, and it's got a lot more hands that it's getting passed through. And so I
yeah.
I I got a lot more notes on Star Trek
Mm,
um, that was like not great for my anxiety. But it was just
Mm,
because, it has to pass through Paramount, who owns the license, right? So like from a story standpoint, IDW and my editor, Heather, they've got those notes, but then Paramount has stuff that like, you have to pay that they have to pay more attention to continuity and stuff
yeah,
like that because Star Trek is doing the model that like Star Wars is doing now, where like everything is canon,
got
so
you.
to speak. So like you have to pay attention to what happened in season 3 of Picard. You can't
Mm,
like disregard that stuff. So they keep you in check with that, but that means you're getting notes from like 6 people.
sheesh.
Whereas like Cyborg, in the beginning, I was getting notes from like 3 because I was still starting. So I was getting notes from Marquise, um, Chris Conroy, who's the group editor,
Hmm.
and then they brought in Marv Wolfman
Oh,
to give notes
nice.
as well, which was crazy.
That's crazy.
But after like issue 2, it was just me and Marquise.
Mm,
So it was one person. And like I said on Star Trek, it's like 6 people, and they've all got something to say. And like
mm.
flipping through those documents after I turn in my shitty first draft of something, I'm just like, oh man, they're probably regretting that they gave me this job because like I'm getting noted to hell. But like I think that's just how comics is, and
Yeah,
you gotta learn to roll with the punches. Because
got you.
writing is rewriting.
Yeah,
And I have to tell myself that every time I turn in a first draft, I'm like, I don't know if this is good, but it's how you bounce back from the notes and how you adjust and pivot. That's really all writing is.
yeah. I don't know how I would do in that space, right? Like I'm a podcaster, I'm a YouTuber. Like I pay attention to narrative, especially for my podcast,
Yeah.
right? But YouTube, like what you see is what I shot.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I might have had to like sneeze or something, but what I shoot is what you see. I can't imagine a world where it's like, I got this idea for this thing. All right, let me turn that in. Nope, it's not good enough. Here's all these, and I'm gonna try to
Yeah.
make it better and better. Like, I feel like by the second rewrite, like it's all good. I wasn't the best writer for the job. You got it.
Yeah, you gotta have thick skin for sure. Like yeah, that's the best way to put it. You gotta have thick skin. But also you gotta realize like you have to remind yourself it's not personal.
Yeah,
And that you wouldn't be here if they didn't believe in the story and if they didn't believe in you. And that's easier to say now when I'm not literally looking at a document.
yeah,
Like you just have to remind yourself that.
yeah. I mean, they hired you, right? Like, ultimately, they don't want to have to go try to hire somebody else.
Right, exactly.
Um, okay, so I guess we've already hit that part of the conversation, right? Advice for people who want to be you, right? I'm sure you don't necessarily feel like you've made it, but you've accomplished a lot in a short time, right? There's a lot of people who want to be in your position, right? I think thick skin is absolutely a takeaway from this conversation. Um, your story is a story of initiative, right? Like milestone or not, like you are like, this is an opportunity. I'm gonna take it. I'm gonna make the most of it. Um, what other advice would you give to aspiring comic writers?
I think the best advice I can give is it's twofold. Before I even go into that, I want to say too, Dennis Cowan, when we did the Milestone Initiative,
Hmm.
he told us that like a lot of the stuff that I've told you about, like reservations about what comes next,
Uh-huh.
he told us he feels the same way now, still, as Dennis Cowan, legend in the industry. Like,
That's crazy.
so I think that's a part of it, though. I think you have to feel that way
Hmm.
because pressure makes diamonds, right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to feel like this is it. So I think that's my first, advice would be you have to want this like this is like it's all or nothing. Like, you
Yeah.
can't just treat this like a hobby. One, because like it's not easy, and two, like it's almost impossible to be a professional, like to live comfortably and be a professional comic book writer. So like if you're not living like if you're not approaching this like this is all you have or want, like there's no point. Like it's
Yeah.
counterintuitive. Like you have to be insane to want to work in comics because like it's so much work, and the
Right.
payoff the payoff is much more fulfillment than it is like I'm living comfortably. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's sentimental more than financial for sure.
Yeah. So you have to want this like this is the only thing that you can do. Like
Mm,
you can't treat this like, oh yeah, I'll write comics. No,
mm,
this has to be all you want
got
because
you.
otherwise you're not going to put out work that you're proud of, and people are going to know that. They're gonna see that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think the other thing I like to say to people is be kind to yourself because it may look like, I've had a lot of quick success,
Hmm.
but like there's a lot of stuff that happens under the surface to get to that point. A lot
Hmm.
of long nights, a lot of doubt over the years if this is the right thing to pursue. Um, a lot of self-doubt if I'm even good at what I'm doing, even to this point.
Hmm.
You you just have to be kind to yourself, and be patient with yourself, like, and realize that this isn't something that's going to happen overnight. And it's honestly, it shouldn't happen overnight because, not to be cliche, but the journey is like the destination or whatever that
Yeah.
whatever the quote is. The journey is what it's all about. Like once you get there, if you're not focused, if you're too focused on like where you're going,
Hmm.
you're gonna miss all the cool shit that you're doing in the moment.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. So, I want to ask you just real quick, just kind of about the role that networking has played in your career. Because I mean,
Yeah.
you've been threading that needle all night, but I want to really hammer home like how important it is to one, get to know people, meet people, but also treat people well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'll take what I said David Walker told me in the beginning. Like
Hmm.
it's invaluable to meet and work with people on your level
Hmm.
because it can be really daunting just starting out. You don't have your bearings. You don't know how to reach the levels of a Scott Snyder. You're
Hmm.
like, how do I do this? And it's like the answer is right in front of you. There's other people who are entering the same space at the same time as you. You should work together, figure this out
Yeah.
together,
Yeah.
create working partnerships that way. And that way, when you network at your level, when you're all coming up, your network widens as their network widens.
Yeah.
All this person I worked with that I did a self-published thing a couple years ago is now doing this thing, and now I can connect with him on a deeper level because we've had that thing when we first came up. Like
Right.
it's important. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. No, that's dope. That's dope. So, Cyborg Volume One, it's called Homecoming, and it is out in trade paperback. If you decided not to grab single issues for whatever reason, that is out on April 2nd. Is what the date is currently. So you can go ahead and pre-order that at your local comic shop. It's
I
got my stamp of
actually
approval. Go ahead.
I actually just got the my comps for that the other day. They
Oh,
sent them
word.
really early because it's like comes like you said in April, right?
Yeah. I mean, the FOC just passed.
Let me I'm
Oh,
sure this is fine. I'm gonna show it to you really quick. Give me one sec.
okay. Cool.
I do want to say
Uh-huh.
I'm being playful here, but I'm like for like 4 years or so, DC has been putting out their trades in hardcover. And now my trade comes out and it's paperback. What's
They
going on?
switched.
I mean,
They
it's still
switched it up.
great, but
Yeah.
I want hardcover.
Yeah. No, I was just talking about that with somebody because Superman Lost. Priest wrote Superman Lost, and
Yeah.
they initially solicited as a hardcover, and now it's listed as a trade. And I'm like, nah, man, give me the hardcover.
To be fair, too, at the same time, I did think it was backwards that hardcovers were coming out before paperbacks and also
Yeah.
more expensive. So I'm like, damn, I want this static, but why is it $30? Because it's a hardcover. But
Right.
so this is the way it should be, but I'm like, y'all could have waited until after my book. That would have been nice.
Right. Right. Nah,
But
that's
yeah,
dope.
no, it is here. Cyborg Homecoming. It's great. They put Booyahs in there too. It
Oh,
starts off.
dope.
Yeah. So that's cool. Because even though that wasn't, like I said, on the horizon when I was writing it,
Hmm.
I retroactively tried to make it fit. Like I added some characters that were in Booyah eventually
Hmm.
in the Cyborg series and stuff like that. So yeah, it's great. I like to sniff my comic books. It smells great. Um, yeah, pick it up when it's out.
Yeah. Like I said, they've got it slated for April 2nd. You can also still find this on shelves. This is the Milestone New Talent Initiative. So there's, I mean, there's so many names in here. It's
Yeah.
really dope that a lot of these people are getting work. Like Julio,
Yeah, Julio's great.
we had he did a series for Image called Home before
Yes.
the
Great.
Milestone Initiative. And I actually bought some signed issues and like a random trade payback of something
Mhm.
else from him, just trading in a comic group. And then I saw
Yeah.
his name on the Milestone Initiative. I was like, that's crazy. But he's got a story in here. Like it's really cool to see you guys getting opportunities after this.
Yeah.
Cause that's always the question. Like, okay, cool. Like they're invested now, but what happens next? So that's
Yeah.
really dope. So you guys can grab this, the Do Talent Showcase, number one. It's also dope that this was only $3.99. Like,
You know, we had thoughts about that. It is dope
uh,
for for the consumer. Almost like this is 100 pages, and normally these anthologies are $10. But okay.
yeah. I thought it was just they just wanted people. I don't know. I don't know if it was subsidized or what, but $3.99.
I feel like it was a mistake, but it
Uh,
happens.
so, but yeah, so that's out. Star Trek or the Sons of Star Trek is out. Let's see, what was the first issue? Oh, the first issue is out March 13th. So it's not
Yeah,
out yet. So you can
about a
pre-order
month
that.
from now.
That's dope. You're gonna make me watch Deep Space Nine. Like,
Look, bro, I'm telling you. Okay, if you're gonna watch Deep Space Nine, I need you to be patient
okay.
because it's going to be rough. All Star Trek shows are rough for about a season, the first season
Mm,
when they're figuring themselves out. But when it clicks with you,
mm.
they're gonna be like part of your family. I'm telling you. And
I'll
as a
take.
fan, you said you watched The Next Generation.
Uh,
Spoil it a little bit. Worf eventually joins the show.
okay.
So,
Okay.
too. So yeah, you should
That's
definitely.
dope. I'll ch- I'll check it out. I'll check it out. Because I gotta grab this series, so I gotta at least know what I'm looking at when I buy it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, cool. So, what else is on the horizon? You got anything else you want to plug?
Nothing as of now. I'm like I said, I'm in grad school. I'm in my final semester, so I've been I wrote and produced a short film that I just finished. We just wrapped filming a couple days ago.
Wow.
Um, so that's really it is graduating and yeah, I'm now using Cyborg and Star Trek to try to not pivot because I still want to write comics, but to get opportunities in like TV and film also.
Nice.
And yeah, more comic opportunities. There's nothing on the horizon yet, but hopefully by the end of the year I will be back. Or I guess with Star Trek, I'm going to be on the shelves, but there'll be something new hopefully by the end of the year, fingers crossed, that they didn't figure out that I don't know what I'm doing and don't want me to write anymore.
Nah, man. You got a bright future, man. I I think, right.
Thank you.
I'm one guy, but nah, I enjoy your writing. I enjoy your approach. I think if nothing else, right, your tenacity will get you more opportunities. So it's
Thank you.
dope, man. But nah, I really appreciate you just taking time to sit with us and have this conversation. And thanks for doing this, man.
Of course, man. I'll be back anytime you want me. This was fun.
Nice. I'll hold you to it.
Yeah.
Um, well, look, guys, again, thanks to Morgan for taking the time out. Thank you to you guys for watching and listening. Make sure you're subscribed if you haven't subscribed on YouTube. What are you doing? Links in the show notes. But yeah, I don't know what you're reading today, but hopefully it's something dope. Peace.